The smell of bacon and burnt coffee used to mean morning rushes at my clinic. Now it meant survival. The dumpster behind Denny's had become my breakfast table. The irony still stung every time I thought about it. A man who once saved animals for a living now waited for leftovers meant for no one. At exactly 5:30 a.m., the night cook tossed a black plastic bag into the bin. I knew the sound by heart. Sometimes, if I was lucky, there'd be half a stack of pancakes still warm, sealed in their takeout box. I timed my hunger to their trash schedule. My name is David Collins. 51 years old, once a licensed veterinarian in Springfield, Missouri. 16 years of treating sick dogs, comforting old cats, helping families through grief. People used to call me Dr. Collins. Now I was just another man wrapped in a torn sleeping bag hiding behind a diner sign that said, "Always open." I kept a 99-cent cup from 7-Eleven, rinsed it each night at a gas station sink, and refilled it with hot water every morning, not coffee, just heat. Inside my coat pocket was a faded library card, the only piece of my old life that hadn't been repossessed. The card smelled faintly of disinfectant and dog hair, a ghost from the clinic I once owned. 3 months earlier, that clinic had been stripped clean during my divorce. Laura, my ex-wife, left with a real estate broker named Craig Whitmore, a man who drove a Tesla and laughed too loud. She took the house, half the practice, and every ounce of self-respect I had left. The judge said it was equitable distribution. I called it execution. I still remember the last thing Laura said to me outside the courthouse. Her lipstick was perfect even under the gray Missouri sky. "No one will ever love a broke man, David. Not even your daughter will." She was right about one thing. My daughter Emily stopped returning my calls a week later. Craig's money bought her new sneakers, new phones, and the version of the truth Laura preferred. After the foreclosure, I lived in my pickup truck until the bank repossessed that too. The tow truck driver apologized while I pulled my sleeping bag from the back seat. "Just doing my job, sir," he said. That word "sir" was the last piece of dignity anyone handed me. Nights were colder now. I learned which alleys stayed quiet, which store managers didn't call the cops. Behind Denny's, the vent pipes breathed out warm air enough to keep my fingers from going numb. That's where I met Frankie, a 60-year-old Marine veteran who'd been on the streets since Reagan was in office. He showed me which churches actually served breakfast and which shelters to avoid. Frankie liked to joke that we were the breakfast shift scavenging before the city woke. He laughed. I didn't. Every morning I told myself I'd only do this one more day, that something would change. But nothing did, until the morning I heard polished shoes on the wet pavement behind me, a sound too clean for this alley. I turned, half expecting a cop, half expecting trouble. What I saw instead was a man in a charcoal suit holding a briefcase that gleamed even under the dim streetlight. He said my name like it belonged to someone else. And just like that, the world I thought was dead began to stir again. The man's shoes stopped 2 feet from the edge of the dumpster, close enough for me to smell the rain off his coat. He looked like he'd stepped out of a bank commercial, gray suit, silver tie. No wrinkles, no hesitation. His voice was calm, practiced. David Andrew Collins. For a moment I thought I was hallucinating. Nobody used my full name anymore. On the streets I was just Doc, or sometimes Old Vet Guy. I straightened up, wiping my hands on the side of my jacket. "Who's asking Richard Whitmore?" he said, pulling a card from a black leather wallet. "Attorney with the Hartley Foundation, New York." The card was thick, embossed, too expensive for a con man from this part of town. He reached into his briefcase and slid out a photograph protected by a clear sleeve. "Is this you?" I stared at it. It was me, in a white veterinary coat, my name stitched on the pocket, smiling in front of my clinic sign, Collins Animal Care. The sunlight on my face looked like it belonged to another life. "Where did you get that?" My voice came out rougher than I meant. "From your late uncle's estate files," he said simply. "Mr. Charles Hartley passed away 3 weeks ago. You've been named the sole heir of his assets valued at approximately $52 million. I laughed a dry, broken sound. "You picked the wrong guy, pal. I don't even have 52 cents. Whitmore didn't blink. "You have 72 hours to appear in New York and claim the inheritance. Otherwise, by the will's terms, the assets transfer to an alternate beneficiary, your ex-wife, Mrs. Laura Collins." The name hit like a hammer. Laura. Her voice still echoed in my head. No one will ever love a broke man. The idea of her swimming in millions while I slept on cardboard made my stomach twist. "This is a scam," I muttered. "You people find sad cases, promise them miracles, take their last dollar." He nodded once, as if he'd heard that before. "Then don't give me $1. Just verify the papers." He handed me an envelope thick with embossed seals and court stamps. "The death certificate, my bar number, the probate filings, all public record." A sharp voice cut through the alley. "Everything all right here, Doc?" It was Detective Angela Ruiz, the beat cop who checked on our block every few nights. Her hand rested casually on her belt, eyes flicking from Whitmore to me. Whitmore turned calm as ever. "Just official business, officer. Mr. Collins has recently come into unexpected responsibility." Angela frowned. "That's so. Mind if I stick around?" "Be my guest," I said. I was shaking now, not from fear, but from the absurdity of it all. $52 million. It sounded like a punchline. Whitmore glanced at his watch, a subtle gleam of silver. "I have a car waiting. We can leave within the hour. You'll have food, a shower, clean clothes. Whatever your decision about the inheritance, at least hear your uncle's message." Rain started again, soft and cold, pattering against the dumpster lid. I looked at the card in my hand, the photo, the lawyer's calm eyes. Then I looked at Angela, skeptical but kind. Her brows lifted as if to say, "What have you got to lose? I'd already lost everything." Maybe it was time to see what was left to find. Angela insisted on seeing me off just to make sure this lawyer of yours wasn't a ghost. So when the black Lincoln pulled up to the curb, its paint reflecting the broken neon of Denny's sign, she stood a few feet away with her arms crossed, watching. Whitmore opened the door like a man used to being obeyed. I hesitated, half expecting this whole thing to vanish like a dream, but the seat's leather smell hit me the second I sat down. Real leather. Soft, warm from the heater, the kind of detail your body remembers even when your pride forgets. The car pulled onto the highway wipers, hissing against the drizzle. Streetlights passed over us in rhythmic flashes, carving my face in and out of shadow. For the first few miles, neither of us spoke. I kept waiting for him to slip up to ask for my social security number, a signature, anything that proved it was a scam. Instead, he asked if I'd eaten. "I had coffee," I said. "That wasn't coffee," he replied, nodding toward the cup in my hands. "We'll stop for something better." At the regional airport, we bypassed the main terminal and turned toward a small hangar marked Private Access Only. A sleek jet waited on the wet tarmac, lights glowing through the fog. I hadn't been on a plane in 15 years. Inside the lounge, Whitmore pointed toward a hallway. "Showers down there? Fresh clothes on the chair. Take your time." I didn't take my time. I clung to it. Hot water hit my skin, and steam filled the small room, washing away 3 months of concrete and cold nights. I stood there long enough for my fingertips to wrinkle. The mirror fogged over. When I wiped it clear, the man staring back looked half alive again. The clothes fit too well to be luck-dark jeans, gray shirt, a jacket that didn't smell like mildew. Someone had planned this. That scared me more than the money. Whitmore handed me a sandwich and a cup of coffee. Real coffee, rich and bitter. "You should know something about Mr. Hartley," he said once we boarded. The jet hummed softly, climbing above the clouds. "Your uncle was brilliant, but eccentric. Believed character was revealed through suffering. He watched people at their lowest to see who they truly were. I didn't know whether to laugh or shiver." "Sounds like a fun uncle." He almost smiled. He didn't believe in luck, only tests. A quiet voice broke in from the cockpit. "Altitude stable? Mr. Whitmore." Coffee refills. The co-pilot turned a young woman with sharp eyes and a kind smile. "I'm Maggie Chen. Welcome aboard, Mr. Collins." No one had called me Mr. Anything in months. It sounded foreign. She looked at me, not through me, and something in my chest loosened. Whitmore leaned back, eyes half closed. "There's a condition to your inheritance," he said finally. "But it can't be discussed until we arrive." I looked out the window. The sun was rising over the clouds, orange and endless. Below somewhere lay the alleys I'd slept in, the streets where I'd stopped being someone. I didn't know what waited in New York, but for the first time in months, the future felt heavier than the past. New York looked unreal from above 1,000 glittering windows stacked like promises no one could keep. When the jet touched down, I expected a driver, or maybe a limo. Instead, Whitmore guided me through a private hangar to a quiet black sedan, waiting with its engine purring. The city smelled like rain and ambition. I hadn't been here since a veterinary conference years ago, back when I thought my life was predictable. The ride to the Upper East Side was silent, except for the rhythm of tires on wet pavement. We passed streets lined with brownstones, flower carts still dripping from the morning drizzle, people walking fast with their heads down. I watched them the way a ghost might watch the living. Whitmore keyed in a code at the front of a glass tower, and we stepped into an elevator lined with mirrors. I caught my reflection cleaner. Yes, but still hollow-eyed. When the doors opened, it wasn't an apartment. It was a museum. The Hartley penthouse stretched across the entire floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Central Park like a moving painting. Bookshelves reached the ceiling, filled with leather-bound volumes and framed photographs of people I didn't know. The air smelled faintly of cedar and old money. "This way," Whitmore said quietly, leading me through a study where the curtains were drawn. A large monitor sat on a mahogany desk. A single line of text glowed across it. "Press play." He nodded once. "I'll be in the next room." I pressed the key. The screen flickered to life. A man appeared, thin, silver-haired, wearing a suit too large for his fragile frame. His voice, though weakened, carried a strange energy. "If you're watching this, David, you've already been tested by life. But now I'll see if you've learned anything." It was him, Charles Hartley, the uncle I barely remembered. I'd seen him twice as a kid at Christmas dinners, where he never stayed long. Back then, he'd given me a leather-bound notebook and told me, "Write down the things that break your heart. Someday they'll make sense." He leaned forward in the video, eyes sharp despite the sickness. "I built this fortune from nothing. But nothing built me first." In 1963, I lived under a bridge in Chicago for 2 winters. I was saved by a man named Jack Collins. Your father. My breath caught. Dad had never mentioned it. He gave me a job, a place to sleep, no questions asked. He never told anyone. I owe him my life. So here's what I'll do with mine. He coughed, long and ragged, before continuing. You'll inherit everything on one condition. Within 5 years, you must help 100 homeless Americans rebuild their lives. Housing, work, treatment, whatever it takes. If you fail or refuse, the entire estate goes to your ex-wife, Laura Collins. I felt the room tilt. His tone softened. I owe your father my life, David. Let's see what you'll do with mine. The screen faded to black, leaving only the faint hum of the city beyond the glass. I stood there for a long time, palms flat against the desk, eyes burning. I hadn't cried since the day Laura left, but now tears came hot and fast. The money didn't scare me. The task did, because for the first time in years, someone believed I might still matter, and I wasn't sure I did. For a long time after the screen went dark, I just stood there watching my reflection shimmer on the black glass. The city lights blinked behind me like stars that had lost their way. Somewhere out there, 100 people were sleeping under cardboard the way I had. And now their fate was tied to mine. Whitmore found me still frozen in the study. You don't have to decide tonight, he said quietly. I already have, I replied. If my father saved you, maybe it's time I start paying the debt forward. That's how the Collins Foundation was born. Not in some corporate boardroom, but over takeout pizza and cold coffee in the penthouse kitchen. Within a month, we leased an old warehouse on the Lower East Side, peeling paint-broken windows, the kind of place that used to house ghosts more than people. It felt right. The first person I called was Frankie. He showed up wearing the same army jacket, his beard thicker, his grin the same. You serious, Doc? You're rich now. Why drag me back into this? Because you know these streets better than anyone, I said. You know who's ready to get off them and who's not. He squinted like he couldn't decide whether to laugh or salute. Guess that makes me your street advisor. Exactly. Next came Angela Ruiz. She'd checked into my story, made sure I wasn't being conned. When she realized it was real, she asked to help off the record at first, then officially as our security consultant. You'll need someone who knows how to spot a scam before it walks through your door, she said. And let's be honest, I don't trust half the people you're planning to help. It turned out neither did the city. The first grant proposal we filed got flagged by the state attorney's office for potential laundering. The tabloids ran a headline, "Homeless vet turns millionaire, is his charity a fraud?" Laura's lawyer filed a petition claiming the will was morally coercive. I wanted to give up more than once, but every time I saw Frankie talking to a man in the doorway, or Angela handing out blankets while pretending not to care, I remembered my father's quiet voice. You don't fix the world by arguing with it. You fix it by showing up. We built the center piece by piece: hot showers, medical exams, job counseling. Some came for a night and never returned. Some came drunk, angry, shaking. But a few stayed. One evening, while Frankie was locking up, I found a 10-year-old boy sleeping under the staircase, clutching a backpack like it was armor. He wouldn't speak at first. I handed him a sandwich and sat on the floor beside him until he whispered his name, Eli. His mother had overdosed 2 weeks earlier. When he finally leaned against me, small and trembling, I thought of Emily, my daughter, the way she used to fit into my arms before the divorce took her away. Later that night, Reverend Paul McCready stopped by a local pastor who'd heard about our work. "You're doing good, son," he said, voice gravelly with age. "But remember, helping people isn't the same as forgiving them. One heals the world, the other heals you." His words stayed with me long after he left, because somewhere deep down I knew who I still hadn't forgiven, and she was the last person on earth I ever wanted to see again. Forgiveness isn't a lightning strike. It's erosion, slow, invisible, relentless. Reverend McCready's words kept echoing in my head, but I didn't understand them until the morning Laura walked back into my life. It was a gray Tuesday, the kind that made even the city seem tired. I was reviewing reports at the foundation office when Angela buzzed through the intercom. "There's a woman here asking for you," she said. "Looks like she hasn't slept in days. I told her to send the woman in." And when the door opened, time folded. Laura stood there, hair unwashed, eyes hollow, her once perfect coat hanging off her shoulders, like it didn't belong to her anymore. The woman who'd walked out of a courtroom in heels and confidence was gone. What remained was someone I barely recognized. "David," she started, voice trembling. "I know I don't deserve to be here." My chest tightened, but I didn't move. "What do you want, Laura?" She took a deep breath. "I lost the house. Craig's company collapsed. He left. I've been staying with a friend, but it's not working out. I don't need your money. I just need a job. Something simple. Anything." There was a time I would have given her everything just to hear her ask. Now, all I could do was stare. "This foundation helps the homeless," I said quietly. "You're not there yet, but you will be if you don't change." Tears welled up in her eyes. For a second, I almost hated myself for saying it, but truth had weight. It had to be said to mean anything. After a long silence, I slid a business card across the desk. "They're a local employment agency. Good people. Tell them I sent you." She stared at the card like it was a lifeline. "You're really not going to give me money?" "No," I said, "but I'll give you a chance. Same thing someone once gave me." Angela had been standing in the doorway the whole time, her usual tough expression softening. When Laura left, she stepped in and closed the door behind her. "That couldn't have been easy," she said. "It wasn't," I admitted. "But I think it was right." Angela nodded. "You did more for her than she ever did for you." Weeks passed. I didn't expect to see Laura again, but one afternoon while I was helping Frankie set up cots for a new intake group, I heard her voice behind me. "Hey," she said, holding a box of donated clothes. "They told me you needed volunteers." She looked different, grounded, quieter. No designer clothes, no polished smile, just a woman trying to make herself useful. Frankie gave her a suspicious glance. I just handed her a clipboard. "Start with the intake forms," I said. That night after everyone left, Angela found me locking up. "You did it," she said. "You forgave her." I shook my head. "Not yet," I said, looking out at the city lights. "But maybe I'm learning how." And for the first time in years, the word peace didn't sound like something that belonged to other people. It was late winter when Richard Whitmore called me back to the penthouse. The city was wrapped in gray fog, the kind that made everything look like memory. Laura had been volunteering for 3 months by then, quietly sorting donations beside Frankie and Angela. The foundation had helped 47 people find jobs or homes. For the first time in years, my life felt steady, like a heartbeat that had finally found rhythm again. When I arrived, Richard was sitting in the study beside the same desk where I'd watched Charles Hartley's final message. 2 worn, leather-bound journals lay in front of him, their edges frayed, pages yellowed with time. "I found these while organizing the estate's archives," he said. "One belonged to your uncle, the other to your father." My throat tightened. My father, Richard, nodded. "Read this." I opened the first journal, Charles's. His handwriting slanted neat but trembling near the end. "In the winter of 1963, I was a man without a name. I'd lost everything. Hunger made me cruel. Fear made me invisible. Then a stranger found me behind a supply depot in Chicago, a man named Jack Collins. He shared his meal, gave me his coat, never asked my story. I offered him money when I recovered. He refused. Said, 'If you want to repay me, find someone worse off than you.' I stopped reading, hands shaking. The second journal was smaller, rougher my father's. On one page he'd written, "Met a man named Charles Hartley today. Smart eyes, proud even when broken. Didn't tell him who I was. Didn't want him to feel owned. Maybe kindness should travel quietly." I had to sit down. My father had known. He'd saved Charles and never told anyone, not even Mom, not even me. They'd both carried the same philosophy half a century apart, like an inheritance passed by silence. Richard leaned back. "Your uncle wanted you to understand this wasn't about wealth. It was about continuing the line one act of mercy at a time." I traced my fingers over the old paper, feeling the weight of two men's unspoken faith pressing down on me. "Then that's what I'll do," I said. "But I'll make it louder this time. People forget too easily." That spring, the Collins Foundation launched a new branch, the Second Chance program. We focused on those no one else would touch: ex-convicts, recovering addicts, people who'd been written off as irredeemable. Frankie ran field outreach. Angela handled safety protocols. Laura managed intake records with quiet diligence. One of our first participants was a woman named Trina, fresh out of rehab, terrified to face her teenage son again. When she finally reunited with him after 6 months of steady work and counseling, she hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "You don't even know me," she said through tears. "Why help me?" I smiled faintly. "Because someone once helped my father," I said. "And he never stopped believing that kindness outlives us if we let it." That night alone in the office, I placed both journals side by side on the desk. The circle was complete. A quiet debt from one man to another, finally repaid 3 generations later. And for the first time, I didn't feel haunted by the past. I felt held by it. 5 years have a way of softening sharp edges. The city skyline looked different now, less like glass and steel, more like a living thing that breathed and healed. The Collins Foundation had grown beyond anything I'd imagined that first night behind Denny's. What started as a half-lit warehouse on the Lower East Side had become a network of outreach centers across 4 states. 112 people had rebuilt their lives. Each name carried a story, and I could still remember most of their faces. Frankie, my old Marine friend, now stood behind podiums instead of dumpsters. He wore a suit that never quite fit his shoulders, talking to rooms full of young people about survival, about dignity. He always ended his speeches the same way: "You can't save everyone, but you can save someone. Start there." Angela Ruiz. Once the skeptical cop who'd watched me like a suspect had become our director of security, and unofficially my closest friend. She kept the same tough edge, but smiled more these days. She said the foundation gave her something worth guarding again. And Laura, God, Laura. She'd rebuilt herself piece by piece, working with survivors of domestic violence, women who'd lost everything the way she once had. Some nights I'd see her sitting with new arrivals, holding their hands, listening without judgment. It still startled me how grace could bloom in the same soil as regret. Then there was Emma. My daughter, now 22, studying social work at the University of Missouri. The first time she visited the center, she stood in the doorway for a long time, watching me speak to a group of new residents. When the meeting ended, she hugged me so tight I forgot how to breathe. "I want to help Dad," she said. "The real kind of help." Those words carried me through the years that followed. One quiet afternoon, I returned to the penthouse to find an envelope waiting on the old mahogany desk. The seal bore my uncle's initials, C.H. Inside was a letter yellowed and folded twice. His handwriting was still elegant, deliberate. "David, if you're reading this, you've completed what I never could. The money was never yours to keep. It was a mirror to see who you really are. I gave you wealth not to lift you from the streets, but to remind you that even in the gutter, you already had everything that mattered. You just needed to use it again. Charles. I set the letter down, my hand trembling slightly. Outside, the Missouri sun was sinking low painting gold across the rows of new homes our foundation had built. Kids rode bikes on the sidewalks. An elderly man watered flowers in a yard that used to be an empty lot. The air smelled like fresh-cut grass and promise. I thought of my father, of Charles, of every stranger whose kindness had shaped my life. The money had done its job, it had revealed the truth. The real inheritance wasn't $52 million. It was the chance to matter again. And as the light faded across those rooftops, I finally understood what they'd both tried to teach me, that in a world obsessed with taking the rarest kind of fortune is to give and to keep giving quietly until kindness becomes the only legacy that lasts. If this story touched your heart, tell us what part moved you the most. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. We'd love to know how far our stories travel. Don't forget to subscribe to Domestic Tragedy for more powerful, true-to-life tales of family loss and redemption. Your voice keeps these stories alive. Share it below.